investment company called P Capital out of Stockholm. I'm also, through the foundation that carries my name, a founder of a number of organizations working on the reimagination of democracy in different ways and supporting social movements in defense of rights and freedoms. It is an honor to be here in Warsaw with this distinguished panel that I'll present in a minute. Warsaw, which is of course a city that has seen both the suffering and the triumph of democracy against the odds. Our panel today is called The Unbroken, Fight for Democratic Sovereignty in a Hostile Neighborhood. And we're bringing together 4 leaders who are very clearly unbroken, in spite of knowing from lived experience what it means to face intimidation and external threats. From Belarus to Georgia, countries in Russia's neighborhood, of course, face relentless pressure from authoritarian interference, disinformation, covert influence, and outright military aggression. And yet, despite these pressures, leaders, citizens, and civil society continue to defend sovereignty, freedoms, and democratic values. This is our hope. But I think even more importantly, since hope is not a strategy, this is our incentive to act and our incentive for solidarity. Not far from here, Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine continues to test Europe's resolve, security, and the very foundations of democracy. Of course, we've seen increasing heat in the past weeks in terms of infringements of violations of European airspace and drone activity and other intimidations. So it is a very unsettling time, I think, for all of us. And of course, Ukrainians are fighting for their sovereignty and for ours as well. Belarus increasingly dragged into complicity by a dictatorship that fears its own people. Georgia, which is in a geopolitical fault line that has cracked before and can open up again. And Poland, here in Warsaw, has become a front line of solidarity and resilience, as well as an example of the challenges to democracy that exist even in societies that still have free and fair elections. So we're fortunate to be joined by 4 remarkable voices. At the far end, Oleksandra Matviichuk, Chairwoman of Ukraine's Center for Civil Liberties and Nobel Peace Prize Laureate in 2022. Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, Mayor of Warsaw and former presidential candidate whose leadership shapes Poland's democratic debate. President Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya, who is, of course, head of the United Transitional Cabinet of Belarus and the leading voice for a free and democratic Belarus. And President Salome Zourabichvili, who is the 5th and last popularly elected president of Georgia and a steadfast advocate for your country's European path. And together, I think, maybe we'll give them a round of applause, actually. So together, for me, your experiences remind us that democracy is not an abstract principle. It is a lived, defended, and often fought for at great personal cost. And our task today, as I see it, is to listen, to learn, and to draw lessons from your courage in how democracies can hold their ground and push back against authoritarian expansionism. And I want to start with setting the stage. And Oleksandra, I'd like to start with you. You have repeatedly talked about the importance of Europe being at the table and the Ukrainian experience, the Ukrainian people being at the table. And I'll come back also to more concrete work you're doing. But if we start from your vantage point in Ukraine, what are the crucial lessons that we should learn in wider Europe for the broader struggle for democratic sovereignty?
I think one of the most important lessons is that ordinary people have power. We get used to thinking through the categories of states and interstates organizations, but ordinary people have a much great impact that they can even imagine, and Ukrainians are a great example. I was in Kiev when Russian troops tried to circle my city. I refused to evacuate, and with a part of my team, we continued our work on the ground. And it was a time when not just Putin, but also our international partners were confident that Ukraine has no potential to resist because Russia is such enormous opposing power that just 3 or 4 days and everything will be done with Ukraine. And I remembered how even international humanitarian organizations evacuated their personnel. But ordinary people remained, and ordinary people started to do extraordinary things. It were ordinary people who helped to survive under artillery's fire. It were ordinary people who broke through the encirclement to provide humanitarian aid. It were ordinary people who took people out from the ruined cities. And suddenly, it became obvious that ordinary people fighting for their freedom and human dignity are stronger than even the second army in the world. And we always have something inside us what we can rely on when we face with such enormous opposing power. It's human dignity. And dignity is in action. Dignity provides us a strength to fight even in unbearable obstacles. Dignity, it's not just feeling responsible for everything which is going on, but to do the right thing to change it. I think this is the main lessons learned, and probably it sounds naive, but it works in our life.
Thank you. That's a beautiful and very important message, because I think agency of the agency of the individual is just really important at this time, and that people feel they have a stake in changing the situation we're in. So, Madam President, I'd like to go next to you. You vetoed last year the so-called Foreign Agents Bill in Georgia, and you called it Russian in its essence and spirit, contradicting our constitution and all European standards. And of course, Georgia, like Ukraine and Moldova, has long faced strong pressure from Moscow. And you're, of course, facing both depolarization and generational divides at home and this Russian pressure from abroad. What do you see as the strongest levers today? What are the strongest levers? Are they civic, political, or international for keeping Georgia anchored in Europe?
Everything together. Not one front would be enough to defend ourselves against the war that we are waging. There's a lot of talk about peace in Georgia, but that's the usual old Soviet, now Russian propaganda, talking about peace and making war. We are facing a hybrid war in Georgia that is probably the war of tomorrow. As usual, we are the testing ground of Russia, of how to try to resuscitate the Russian imperialism influence around it and further. And the hybrid war is their new instrument, and they're, as they were in 93 or in 2008, testing it in Georgia. And to fight hybrid war, which is made of everything, propaganda, cyber attacks, manipulation of elections, they're using our own the democratic instruments. It's a perversion of democracy for the use by totalitarianism, because it's totalitarianism in the making that we're seeing. And to fight that, you need all the elements. You need inside strong civic resilience, and I think that we have it. Our fight for resilience, of course, is not the armed, heroic resilience of the Ukrainian people, but it is very peaceful and without any means, because we do not have any means, resilience of the civic society against attacks that come on all different fronts, and now including the latest that the Russian handbook has developed against the civic society and against the people that protest now for 308 days on the streets of Tbilisi. It's to not only target them, but target their family, their parents and grandparents, because nothing until now has been able to stop those people from continuing to walk the streets in Tbilisi, walk very peacefully again. I want to underline that, that not a single shop window has been broken over these 308 days by the protesters. I'm not saying and not talking about the violence that was exerted by the police. But again, the civic resilience inside the country is not sufficient in today's world if there is not attention from outside. And one major problem that Georgia has today is probably to be a small country, which the ruling party of this country, under the instigation, in accordance, whatever we qualify, of Moscow, is trying to put into isolation. And what we need from you all is attention, attention, and attention, because that's the only defense against isolation. When some of our partners think that they can engage the authorities to bring them back to their old pro-Western, pro-European path, that is an illusion. You do not bring back a country or a ruling party that has gone that far into the arms of Russia. But you can still bring back the population, you can still protect the population. And I want again to underline, Georgia is not lost to Russia, because Georgia is Georgians' population, is the population that is on the streets, and those that are not on the streets that will come out tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, because the inner determination of the Georgian people never to go back under Russian domination is there, is entire, and is not going to weaken. But we need your attention, your solidarity, because in a world of multiple crises, it's very difficult for a small country to exist on the international scene, and that's what we need. That's the reason why I'm here.
Thank you. President Tsikhanouskaya, I want to go to you. You, of course, I would guess, would say similar things, but the big difference, of course, for you is that this fight is fought in exile, and you've said again and again that Belarus is not lost, and you've kept Belarus on Europe's agenda, reminding us that Lukashenko may have enabled Russia's war, but the Belarusian population has not. And when you talk about the resistance inside the country, the hidden struggle, if you will, what does it look like today? And how do you and the movement that you lead, how do you maintain trust and legitimacy in spite of all the censorship and repression that is happening within Belarus?
So for sure, I want to remind that our resistance is continuing for 5 years already. And though we are fighting the same enemy, impose the ambitions of Russia, Belarusians, Ukrainians, Moldovans, Georgians, we have a little bit different context. It's our unique fights, though all of us need allies in our fights, because it's impossible to win any war or any battle if you don't have friends around. So all these years we are staying in touch with people in Belarus, because sometimes I hear that, oh, you are fighting from exile. It is not. Yes, we have built strong alternative institutions of power in exile. Our media have to work from exile. Our NGOs that have been liquidated in Belarus, they managed to restore their activity in exile and continue to work. But it doesn't mean that all those who were fighting now live in exile. Our power is inside Belarus. We, thanks to internet, we have possibility to stay in contact with people on the ground. Thanks to our neighbors, people still have possibility to travel to both to Lithuania and Poland and share information and keep these people-to-people ties. And in Belarus, we have small underground cells, who are just showing small acts of sabotage. For example, in 2020, it was 2 years after our uprising, when the war in Ukraine has started. Nobody thought that there are partisans in Belarus, but they were there. People donated to Ukrainian army massively, and they were repressed for this. Our military volunteers from Belarus went to fight to Ukraine. Nobody thought that it might happen. So now what is important, people are, they have to be underground, of course, because the level of repression is awful. Every day in Belarus, till now, 10, 15 people are detained every day. But what people are doing, they are leaking information. They're providing those who can speak with what's happening in Belarus. They're providing us information how regime militarizing economy and earning money on the blood of Ukrainians. About 300 enterprises in Belarus now are producing military stuff for Russian war machine. Belarusians, even high-ranked Belarusians, they are providing us information how sanctions, for example, are circumvented, and it led us to close loopholes. Also, resistance movement is still there, and I'm sure that when the moment comes, people will be prepared. You know, despite all the repressions and tortures and intimidation of the regime, people didn't forget, people didn't forgive. And they cannot do a lot now because, you know, the space is really like extremely limited, but we can squeeze from this space as much as we can. So the connection is not lost. We have communication even with the people around, you know, Lukashenko, because people understand that we have to change the situation. We want independence from Belarus. We want a European future for our country, and people want to serve to this aim. Those who are in exile can be more vocal, but it doesn't mean that those who are inside the country can do less.
Thank you. Mayor Trzaskowski, Rafał, Sviatlana, of course, talks from a country under severe repression. You live in a democratic society, yet you've also experienced democratic backsliding and fierce polarization in this country. From your perspective as a mayor and also a former presidential candidate, what does Poland's own democratic struggles teach us about defending democracy within the EU, inside Europe?
Good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for coming to Warsaw. Well, I think that there is a lesson to be learned on democracy, but also that our reading of the situation in our part of Europe was always correct. And I'll start with the second. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we were trying to explain to our colleagues in the West that Putin is a thug, not a business partner, that energy could be used as a weapon, that Russians are actually engaged in disinformation campaigns all the time, and that we should be helping our friends in the East in order to stabilize their democracies and offer them a European perspective. And honestly, 20 years ago, no one was listening. And many people were telling us that we were obsessed with Russia. It turns out that we were right on all of those counts, but unfortunately, we had to learn in a very harsh way. Question is whether we've really learned and whether those lessons about energy, about sanctions, about supporting our friends in the East are going to be really entrenched. Similarly, when it comes to democracy, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we were explaining to our friends that problems with democracy, with polarization, with the rule of law are not relegated to Poland and Hungary, because those were the voices that I've heard from our colleagues in the West who are saying, well, you know, your democracies are not really well developed and well entrenched, and that's why you have problems. And I was telling them, guys, you know, you have exactly the same problems, and you will have exactly the same problems if we do not get our act together, and if we do not stand up to populists, if we do not try to do something with disinformation, if we do not strengthen the rule of law, if we do not find a new raison d'être for a European integration. I spent half of my life doing European integration, and I think that some of our colleagues have not learned the lesson that they need to wake up and actually think about the messaging and think about the policies that they're proposing, because some of those are a bit counterproductive. When it comes to our trade policies, when it comes to Green Deal, when it comes to our migration policies, we need to be doing something about that. And similarly about strengthening democracy. Unfortunately, it turns out that we were right. So now there is a question of how to go about it. And I will finish this with just one example. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago, everyone was asking me, how can we help? And I was telling them, strengthen the local government, guys. Strengthen the regions. Because somehow populist
do not win the regions and the cities so easily. I was telling them, when you think about the EU budget, try to think about it, decentralize it even more. What's the answer of the European Union now? They want to centralize the European budget. I mean, guys, I mean, let's learn the lessons, please. I mean, the populists are everywhere. Let's learn the lessons, how to be effective, how to put the priorities right when it comes to, for example, Europe's competitiveness and defense, how to strengthen local and regional government, because that's where the democracy really is. How to make the instruments which are going to help us entrench the rule of law more effective. Because it seems that no one's learning the lesson. And I started with the way we were perceiving reality 15 or 20 years ago about Russia, and we were proven right. Unfortunately, we were proven right through very harsh means. So I don't want to be proven right yet again on democracy and the rule of law. And it turns out that we set up, you know, the Pact of Free Cities a few years ago. Budapest asked Bratislava and Prague, and there were many Western cities who were joining to help us out. Now we hear voices from American cities that they want to come and learn from us how to strengthen democracy and how to strengthen resilience. I don't want to be right yet again, guys. Wake up.
Thank you. Oleksandra, you've been one of the leading voices exposing Russia's abduction and indoctrination of Ukrainian children, a crime designated not just to break families, but also to erase in certain ways a nation's future. And this, when we talk about hybrid warfare, I don't think that even captures the violent nature of this and how it kind of assaults identity and truth itself. And I would love to hear you talk a little bit about how do you think about what's effective in this struggle, which is painful, of course, and not least talk about the accountability mechanics and mechanisms that I know you're working on.
It's a very sensitive problem for Ukrainian society, because for every nation, children, it's their wealth. So if you want to ruin the nation's future, you have just stole their children. And this is what Russians are doing. And we also feel this pressure of time. We have no time, because children lose their childhood. We lose these children. These 20,000 Ukrainian children who were legally deported, they put in Russian re-education camps. They told they're not Ukrainian children, they're Russian children. Their families, their parents refused from them, and they will be adopted by Russian families who will bring them up as Russians. And the problem is that among these 20,000 children, there are children from orphanages, there are children whose parents were killed by Russians, but they still have relatives and families who want to return them. There are children whose parents were arrested by Russians, but they also supposed to be adopted. And Russian legislation provides a right for a Russian adoptive family to change the name of kid, the date of birth, the place of birth. It means when the parents will be finally released, if we speak about small kid like 2 or 3 year old, it will be a very less chance for them to find their kid in Russia. What is also not visible, that Russia pretends to be great, but Russia is very poor. And a lot of people live in depressive region in unbelievable poverty, and for them to take Ukrainian kid, it's a way how to earn money, because they start to receive money from Russian budget. And it put Ukrainian children in extremely vulnerable situation, because they found themselves in a family who don't want them, don't love them, they have no tools how to protect themselves from physical abuse, from sexual violence. In December last year, Ukrainian teenager who was illegally deported to Russia, separated with his sister, committed suicide because he was given forcibly to Russian family. He tried several times to return to Ukraine, but he failed because he was taking his documents, and this was last form of protest which he could invent it. So we really have no time. Plus to this, let's speak about children under occupation. We have 1,600,000 children under occupation. Their identity eye roast. They're militarized starting from the kindergarten. For example, their parents are forced to provide their children to camps where children wearing military uniform, lining up, live in barrack, teach how to use weapon. Russia is preparing the new generation of Putin soldiers from this 1,600,000 Ukrainian children, because at the age of 14, they will receive the Russian passport. At the age of 18, they will be forcibly recruited to Russian army, which means that they will go to fight and to die in any country which Russia sent them to go to fight and to die. Because Russia is empire, and empire has a center, but has no borders. Empire always try to expand. And that is why when we speak about deported children, children under Russian occupation, it's not just human rights problem, it's security problem. Because if we will not find a way how to save these children, when they became adults, they will come. So I will stop here also with noting that these crimes against children, it's a very visible sign that this war has genocidal character. Putin openly says there is no Ukrainian nation, there is no Ukrainian language, there is no Ukrainian culture. For 11 years, we are documenting how these words converted in horrible practice. When Russians physically exterminate active local people on the ground, mayors, journalists, children writers, musicians, teachers, priests, environmentalists, how they ban Ukrainian language and culture, how they destroyed Ukrainian cultural heritage, and how they take Ukrainian children to Russia to raise them up as Russians.
Rafał, I want to follow up on your last response, because I think you point to something important when we operate in kind of still the part of the world that's still free and democratic, at least in elections. You talk about the internal threats. I mean, we know there are external threats to our democracies, and we also know that there's a supply of authoritarian and anti-democratic ideas. But what creates the demand, the soil for these ideas to actually succeed in democratic elections? You talked a little bit about it, about the role of local government and some of the misconceptions of other parts of the West where people have been saying in the establishment that they don't have the kind of problems that you may have experienced for a longer time. What do you think, how do you think about addressing this soil for extreme and authoritarian and anti-democratic ideas? How do we get to the root of that so that we can break these tendencies?
Well, I think that the message that we were trying to convey is slowly understood everywhere, because the threat of populism is appearing not only in our part of Europe, but also in France, Germany, Italy, and other countries. But if we are to do something about it, I mean, if it's the increasing polarization, if it's this mood of anti-establishment, if it's this increasing disinformation campaigns also fueled by Russia, if it is the thing that our kids are growing up, on social media, where actually the algorithms are promoting conflict, those are serious issues. And now the question is, are we going to do anything about that, especially with artificial intelligence rising, and especially some of those mechanisms in the hands of authoritarian states, to put it mildly. And now the thing is that, if we are to do something about that, we need to take some courageous decisions. And of course, on the one hand, this is about strengthening a local democracy and participatory democracy, because that's the closest democracy to people. But it's also a question to us: are we going to do anything about the way in which social media work? We are a power to be reckoned with. I'm talking about the European Union. Are we going to try to do something about it? It's difficult because, of course, with the current administration in the US, I mean, the trend is different. But honestly, I mean, now the algorithms which are set by people are just promoting polarization, are just promoting conflict. It is very difficult to convey your message when it gets no traction. I mean, whatever I write on social media, when it's not controversial, it doesn't get any following. It has to be aggressive and controversial for it to actually get any traction. I mean, there are things we can do together in order to try to fight it. Also, when it comes to reining in artificial intelligence, we're trying to do it in Europe. We're trying to do it with our British friends. What about our friends elsewhere? It is also about our priorities. I mean, as I've said, for example, you know, I've been doing European politics for years, and I'm teaching trade policies to my students. I mean, are we really learning the lessons, and are we really listening to the people? Let me give you one example. We are signing those trade deals. Great, wonderful, win-win. But we are opening our public procurement to countries from outside of the European Union. Can we afford it? Really? And then, for example, you know, tenders are won in my city by the Chinese, okay? And only we had a ruling of the European Court of Justice in December, which allows us now to get the Chinese out of our tendering procedures, okay? That's just one of the examples. Are we going now? We are slightly changing our priorities when it comes to the Green Deal, because of course we need to fight global warming, but at the same time we need to do something about the competitiveness of our economy. Are we really like, you know, throughout my presidential campaign I talked to a lot of farmers, and they were telling me those guys in Brussels don't understand anything. I don't want to use pesticides. I'm just sending up those drones up, infrared, and they tell me I need to do it here, here, and there, and I know better than the procedures prepared by some bureaucrats. Honestly, how should I react? Or when they tell me, you know, we are actually adopting those incredibly stringent measures, and then we are opening our borders for produce from all around the world without asking them to do the same. We are paying carbon tax, you know, to actually ship our produce from southern Poland to our ports in northern Poland, and then we are signing a deal with Mercosur where those guys are not going to pay any carbon, or the carbon tax is going to be like this. Guys, you're talking to one of the most pro-European politicians you're going to find in this country and probably in Europe. But I mean, we need to start doing something about that. And that's the answer to your question, because those populists are not coming from nowhere. So it's a question of strengthening our democracy. It's a question of addressing the problems of the way in which we communicate. It's a question of fighting disinformation really and effectively. But it is also a question of changing our priorities, of defending European integration and still proving it to the others that it still makes sense. Because our generation in Poland understands that, the younger people don't. And we need to do something about that, and that really needs some courageous decisions. And when I hear Ursula von der Leyen recently in her address, State of the Union, the direction is right. Is it courageous enough? I have doubts. So that's where we need to put our heads together and do what we need to do. And last thing is, we've been telling you guys for ages that you should take responsibility for Europe's defense. Seriously, okay? Did you really need Trump to tell you that? As simple as that.
Thank you. President Zourabichvili, so Rafał talks about the role of technology, and of course Georgia has faced propaganda and legal manipulation and disinformation for decades, but it's of course changing with technology. We saw, of course, on the other side of the Black Sea a very pro-European political outcome in spite of a lot of disinformation and propaganda. But I wanted to ask you two things. The first one is kind of drill a little bit deeper in what you said in your last response. What have you seen that has been efficient? What has worked in terms of countering the disinformation and the use of technology in adding to the repression in Georgia? And the second question, you talked about the importance of international support. Can you be more specific? What kind of political, economic, security support is most important in your view in kind of keeping the European path open for Georgia?
Well, the answer and the question is the same. What has been working against this disinformation campaign and all the means and technological means that were used is information and trying to use exactly the same things, the social network, because the regular channels of communication and information are those that have been directly targeted. And even today, what we're fearing now is that the last opposition channels will be reduced to silence. Regional journalists have been the first targeted, and we have Zia Marlobeli, which I cannot not today recognize, that is a woman journalist that has been in jail. A policeman spit in her face, and she slapped him back. And she has been in preventive jail for 8 months and then sentenced to 2 years prison for that, after having been one of the most courageous journalists in the regions where we need them most of all, because that's where you need to win the information battle. And we're certainly not winning the information battle, because all the resources are targeted, those of the NGOs, those of the official information channels. So we have to resort to social networks, to TikTok, to all of these. But there we're also facing artificial intelligence. I have one example. One day I listened to a video recording that showed my face, my voice, and I was speaking in Russian, which I don't speak. And I was speaking in Russian, explaining to the people that I was receiving money from Sokar, the Azerbaijani oil company. That's how it works, and that's very difficult to fight. So that fight, we cannot win it alone. That's why I'm saying from outside, of course, attention, but also common fight. And only European Union together, the European countries, can really develop a counter-strategy on this huge disinformation strategy that is in place by Russia. Because Russia has been fighting that fight much before and much longer. The Soviet propaganda was the ancestor of everything we see today. And they have continued, and never forget that Putin is not a military leader. He's a KGB leader who knows how to use the psychological warfare, the information warfare, and that's where he feels at ease. That's what he understands. And never the many institutes that were working in the Soviet Union on the different components of the Soviet Union, of the countries, they knew their mentality, their history, how to manipulate this or that characteristic of this or that country. All that is being put at use today. So to counter that, it needs at least the same type of efforts of understanding and of putting together, sharing the means to fight it back. How can we fight cyber attacks? In my presidential administration, I had 3 cyber attacks to which nobody reacted. First of all, because the official authorities were not very interested into defending my information and my administration, but also because it doesn't exist. There are no resources to fight back. And how can you defend, even if we were tomorrow having more democratic elections, how would we defend from cyber attacks the Central Electoral Commission and the different programs that you need to organize this election and their results? So there it is a common fight against a common enemy, and it's a global war that takes military aspects, that takes hybrid aspects, and it has to build. You were talking about Europe finally getting its act together for rearmament and defense and security. Well, security has to be dealt on all fronts, and the non-military aggression is one that needs at least the same type of efforts, the same type of budgets, and the same type of understanding of the threats. And to finish, I will just say that after our elections, which were the first test of how you manipulate completely, totally elections, nobody came, and I asked many times to different partners in the European Union, nobody came. There was one time a talk about a mission that would come to analyze, and then it disappeared. Nobody came to understand what were the means that were used, what were the technologies that were used, and it would have been very interesting. And it's very interesting today what they have used in Moldova, despite the fact that Moldova got out with victory of this struggle. But we still have to understand what they tried to do, how they tried to do, because that's going to happen in other countries. It is not finished. And it's a fight that is as important to win than the military war. Because even for Ukraine, after the war, when finally we get to a decent ceasefire, there will be the war about elections. And it has to be won again.
Thank you. President Tsikhanouskaya, I want to talk to you also about international support. You've said, we Belarusians has always stood on the European side, on the side of freedom, tolerance, law and human rights. Yet, as you talked about just now, Belarusian activists face maybe the harshest repression in Europe. What do you feel could be the best forms of international support for you and the citizens of Belarus right now? And what should the international community do differently to be more effective in supporting your cause and making sure that it's not forgotten?
I cannot say the most essential type of assistance, because everything is important. Let's take political support. Political support means recognition. And sometimes when I hear that politicians call us democratic movement opposition, you have to explain, look, use the correct words. We are not opposition, to Lukashenko. We are people who want changes. This is Lukashenko with his small military apparatus in opposition to Belarus. We represent people. Don't forget, we won elections in 2020. And if our partners, our democratic allies, our Western friends said A, not recognizing Lukashenko as legitimate leader, say B. Invite us as real representatives of Belarus to your different state events. And we actually, as Democratic Forces of Belarus, we advanced a lot in this direction, because we formalized relationship with the USA, European Union, European Parliament, Canada, UK. So we really achieved a lot. But sometimes I see that some leaders are hesitating, how to call us or just invite us to be only observers, but not, to decide anything. It's about boldness. In Russia, nobody ask Europeans if they can, send missiles to Estonia or to Poland. They just do it. And you do, because any undecisiveness is like weakness for dictators, and it emboldens them. So political support to those who really represent nation is essential. It's in the case of Georgia as well. So economic support, it's vital, especially for those who have to walk from exile. Because, as I said before, our media are ruined in Belarus, and our media had to relaunch their broadcasting from abroad. Media is essential in the fight against propaganda. We count a huge propagandistic machine, and we need assistance from Europe, first of all, because we are working on your flank in our common fight. The same as for human rights defenders, we need to protect people, political prisoners, collect evidences of crimes of Lukashenko. And we here, I again want to say the words of gratitude to Lithuania, who sent referral to International Criminal Court to start investigation against Lukashenko's crimes. So political structures for a long time, we hear that Europe cannot support political structures as Office of Sviatlana Tsikhanouskaya or United Transitional Cabinet because it's political structure and we don't want to interfere into politics. But again, it's about recognition. Said A, say B. It's not a fight of Belarusian people only. Now it's the issue of the security of the whole region. You have just, our partners have just one choice. Either it will be Lukashenko, who is serving to Putin's interest and is going to be a constant threat to security of our neighbors and the whole Western world, or it should be democratic forces who cherish the European values, who want to become the part of European family of countries and be a source of stability, to be a reliable partner to our neighbors. This is the choice. So support economically Belarusian civil society, our cultural initiatives, because we have to defend our national identity, because Russia is doing in Belarus the same what they are doing on the occupied territories of Ukraine. They want to erase everything national from the country, from the places. And there is a process of Russification in Belarus. They want to they rewrite our history, erase everything that connects us to Europe and just underline what connects us with Russia. We have to defend it. And the questions of security I already touched a little bit. Of course, I think it's obligation of Europe. Of course, it would be much better in alignment with the USA, this transatlantic unity, to defend Ukraine. It's extremely important that Ukraine wins this war on their conditions, because it will give opportunity not only for such countries as Belarus, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia to feel much more secure and confident, but it also will show to dictators that democracy is strong, that democracy has teeth. And security is not only about military power. Just believe me, sometimes, and the Ukrainians here showed it very well, that military power sometimes is senseless if you don't have people ready to defend your land, to defend your values. And here we have to invest into people, first of all, but of course it's in people of Belarus, because we're also part of this regional security architecture. And don't overlook Belarus. Don't overlook Belarus in these peace negotiations, because I don't think that we need this pro-Russian Lukashenko's balcony over Europe, and that Putin wants to put his own Lukashenko's or Yanukovych's in every country just to govern. But invest into people. It's really important. As Oleksandra said, people is our power.
So I'm going to give the last word to you, Oleksandra, and ask for a short answer, if I can. We've heard about the strengths to democracy inside the EU, the hybrid threats and other threats to Georgia, and the resistance from exile and within Belarus. And of course, your struggle and Ukrainian struggle runs through all of those. And at this time, you're shaping very much how your neighbors define their sovereignty, and also how Europe defines its future. You've said also that this war has no borders, and I think that's something that we deeply feel. But what do you want to leave this audience with?
I witness that modern authoritarian regimes, they have no common ideology, but they promote common narratives. They try to convince us that fact doesn't matter and truth doesn't exist, that dictatorship means stability and security, but democracy means inefficiency and weakness. They attack humanitarian ideas, humanistic ideas like freedom of press, human rights, independence of courts. And I think we made a mistake that we stopped promoting democracy. We stopped explaining people that democracy is not ideal way how govern the society, because still there are a lot of problems and people are angry. For example, we have social inequality or some other concrete problems in concrete societies, but we must explain people that alternative to our not ideal democracy is hell of authoritarian regimes. And these regimes don't solve this problem at all, but people can't criticize them because they will be repressed. So we have two tasks for current moment. We have to perfect our non-ideal democracy and protect our non-ideal democracies, because the alternative to our non-ideal democracies, once again, it's a hell of authoritarian regimes.
So I want to deeply thank all four panelists for your honesty and your candor and your courage, first and foremost. I think what we learn is that the battle for democracy and for rights and freedoms has many faces, but they're all deeply interconnected. And I think the instinct of us standing by and seeing this happening, being frustrated by our lack of influence, we have to change that within ourselves. And I think the deep call to all of us is to feel a deep sense of agency at this time and to think about what our means are, both in our own countries, but also in solidarity with those who fight on our behalf. So I really, really want to deeply thank all of you for the work you're doing and for being here today with us. Please join me in thanking this brilliant panel.
Thank you very much.